you're a first time parent, you don't know what's normal and what's not normal. So I was like, all right, well, maybe this much blood loss is normal. Maybe I'm supposed to be feeling like this. I don't know. But it was just, it was like just a weird, surreal experience that, people were like, yeah, that's not what happened to me when I had my kid. Yeah, it's been, Evan will be 2 next month. And we're still trying to figure out what happened.
I think that's the biggest, what I've noticed, and it doesn't matter what type of birth you have or anything. I think the biggest issue that people have is not understanding what happened.
Right.
There's no one going through and being like, look, everything was normal until this.
Right.
Or, hey, this happened and this is where your trauma comes from. This is what happened to your kid. This is what happened to your body. Or, hey, we didn't notice this until we got to this point, or whatever it is. And it's not holding fault to, your providers, because they're not mind reader psychic people that can see everything going on the inside of our bodies and but they have the equipment that they're trying to figure out from the equipment that's beeping and doing all these different things of all the monitoring. That's how we have it to do the preventative stuff. But things do sometimes slide under the radar, or things do happen. Like in your case of the tearing, it was not expected. Your baby was little, nobody tiny. Thought that was ever going to happen. And even when you were like, I want a C-section, and your doctor was like, we're not going to do a C-section. That doesn't even make any sense. You're good. You're going to have a vaginal birth. And then you have your birth, and it ends up being a complete nightmare of and everything that you've never heard of before, because we hear of what to expect for pregnancy, for birth, for after, and all stuff. But no one's talking about the trauma that happens. Nobody's talking about NICU. Nobody wants to talk about NICU, what happens with NICU babies, or what it looks like when a team of nurses or doctors or people come in and they're examining your kid and you are helpless. You can't do anything. You just gave birth one way or another, and there's your kid and a bunch of people and equipment, and it's scary. It's so extremely scary. And so nobody talks about that. And then nobody talks about what they end up having to do with you either. So right. Even if you you had a vaginal birth and they had to do all these repairs, well, somebody that had an emergency C-section, if they end up hemorrhaging, if they end up whatever, there's a lot of extra stuff they have to do on the inside to try to get to stop the bleeding. And sometimes you leave the OR and you end up back up in the OR because the bleeding didn't stop. They missed a spot. There's something else going on. You're getting now big blood clots. There's other things happening. That's why you have to monitor blood after you have a baby. No matter which way you give birth, they have to monitor how much blood is coming out of your body, what's happening, what colors of stuff coming out. There's a lot of things they're looking for, because it could mean something's going on that they didn't see. You look fine, you look healthy, you feel fine. And all of a sudden you're something doesn't feel right. And then you pass out, and it's right. Oh, there's something going on, but nobody talks about any of that stuff. And then being a first time out, you don't know anything about it. Everybody expects the normal stuff. It's going to be painful. That's all we ever hear. Oh, you're going to give birth. It's going to be painful. Nobody tells you it could be hours. It could be minutes. Right. And those minutes that the fast people I want a fast labor. You might not want a fast labor, because those fast labors could be extremely painful and difficult and horrible. You know what I mean? You don't know, the long labors could be horrible, but the fast ones can too. So it's you really don't know what you're going to get. And I feel we miss the mark of just not being honest. The medical side is so busy doing their medical stuff that they don't sit down and be this is what happened. This is what you need to know. And childbirth classes should be about all of that. We should be hearing about all sides. And I went to childbirth classes and I asked about C-sections. I was having a C-section. I already knew I was having a C-section. I asked them about C-section. They didn't even want to talk about it.
Right. Same.
If it happens, then you get to see. And I was no, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about what it's like having a C-section. I want to talk about emergency. They don't want to talk about it.
With us for our, we did a hospital tour. It was right before COVID. And I said to the nurse, just tell me about C-section protocol and where everything's been. And she was like, you don't want to have a C-section. And I was like, no, I do want to have a C-section. You're going to tell me about what's going on. She's like, but look at all these beautiful birth rooms. You know, everything's state of the art and everything's redone. We don't really want to talk about having C-sections. I was like, well, where's the OR? And she was like, it's there. You don't have to worry about that because look at these rooms. They're so great. Look the ceilings. Everything's so big. Like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry. Don't think that you're going to need to have a C-section. I was like, I don't think, you know, I want to have a C-section. I knew, you know, from probably my early 20s that I wanted to have a C-section. I did not want to have a vaginal delivery. I don't remember why, you know, initially that was, but I was just like, yep, nope. That's, you know, that's not a thing that I want to go through. Just, you know, cut me open, we're good. But yeah, and yeah, it's probably going to be one of the biggest regrets of my life is that I didn't push harder. But then again, like, it was hard because my OB was out. So the conversation that I thought that I was going to be able to have with her about it from like 6 months on, she was sick. She came back the week that I gave birth. So the first time that I had seen her in like 2 months or something like that was the day that my water broke. I saw her in the morning and then my water broke that night. I had spoken to the covering OB and I said, you know, I want a C-section. I don't want a vaginal delivery. And she was like, well, chances are your doctor is going to be back by then. So I won't be the one doing the delivery. So that's the conversation you have with her. Didn't get a chance. So I didn't know that I could walk into the hospital and be like, okay, give me a C-section, you know?
Yeah. And that should have been documented too. When you talk to the other doctor. Yeah. I was like, it should be like part of your thing. And I think what probably the best thing about when Dr. Rebecca comes on is she says, we can make your birth plan before you're even pregnant. Like she's like, you can do things way in advance. My doctor, we knew we were going to have this baby. So it's like, we planned things. She knew I was like, we're having a C-section. We're going to do this. We had things planned out well before. So now as like time has gone on, there's a thing that first time moms don't know. You can plan super far ahead. It's not a birth plan like people bringing in a list of like, you know, I need the candles here and I need the lighting at this way and I need some ambiance, some music over here. No. It's not like that. You being like, this is what I want is what I want. And I've noticed a lot of people that do want C-sections. There's actually a lot of people that do want C-sections in case people are this is something that I wish more people knew about. There is a lot of us that don't want to deal with pain and we don't want a vaginal birth. There is a huge, huge, huge percentage of women that are like, I'm over it. I don't have to be what you think I am. I'm not cattle. You don't need to push me through the trough. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. This is my choice, my body, that kind of thing. So like, literally, I've met a lot of us that are like, they've already decided before they got pregnant. Then they're pregnant. Then they go to their doctor says, and they're like, I love my OB, but my OB is trying to convince me not to do, you know, C-section. So then they're either looking for another doctor or they're trying to, you know, figure other things out or trying to convince the doctor with bringing in like documentation and evidence and like, look, it's safe and it's, you know, whatever. And I'm like, why do we have to do that? Why does anyone have to do that much work to get a C-section when it is your choice? It's your body. It's your, you know, so I do have this thing of where there's these people that say, why would somebody want to elect a surgery? Well, guess what? There's a lot who wanted a C-section. For some reason, it was in their mind. They wanted a C-section, ended up with a vaginal birth, ended up horrible. And they're never going to have children again. Or they're like, I knew I should have got a C-section. It's my biggest regret that I should have got a C-section. Their kid ended up with NICU. Their kid ended up with brain damage. They ended up with physical injuries themselves that they have to live with. These are like damage and carnage that came from a vaginal birth that we have stopped talking about because somewhere in there from like our mothers to grandmothers, Like our grandmothers knew the horror stories, but they're not around telling us the stories anymore. Our mothers don't know because they had their babies in the hospital, medicated or whatever, you know? So now they come to us where chances are we're mostly surviving. Our children are more surviving than they were before, but we don't realize like this whole all natural, have your baby out of your vagina is like, it's a whole other level of stuff. So it kind of like just makes me so annoyed because I'm like, you have no idea how many of us like almost have to fight when there's no reason to fight. Like I do know America is a lot easier because exactly like you're saying, you can walk into a hospital and say, I'm pregnant, I'm in labor, I want a C-section, cut me open, get that room ready for me. I'm ready for this, you know, to anybody. And, you know, and they'll be like, okay, let's check your vitals and get you in there. You know what I mean? Get you going. But it's like, a lot of people don't know that. They don't know that this is an option. And that's how far advanced we've come with medical care, is that now we're like, you have choices. Like you don't get to just sit down and suffer and push through all by yourself, like with no pain relief or something. But this is April. This is like C-section awareness month and all this stuff. But man, there's two types of us. There's the women judging the other women for wanting a C-section or getting a C-section, even an emergency C-section. Right. And then there's the other side that was like, all I've ever wanted was a C-section. I don't want to have a vaginal birth. So somehow we've forgotten to like respect each other's wishes, respect each other's choices, respect each other's bodies, and be like, your birth, your body, do whatever you want. As long as you guys come out on the other side and you guys are all good. That's all I want for you, as like from mother to mother. That's all I want for everybody. Because if I knew the things that I had known years and years ago, I would have never wanted a natural birth in any possible way, like in every level, like pain relief, like I want pain relief. You know what I mean? Like cut me open, like take the baby out. Like there's things that I didn't know because I was just so like following like what everybody said, because as a first time mom, you just don't know anything. And so I'm like, no, looking back, having a planned C-section I ended up turning into an emergency C-section and all that stuff. And yes, it was elective because I could have easily had a vaginal birth with my son. I could have had a vaginal birth, but I chose not to. And so on my papers, it says elective, which by the way, people say in America, if you choose an elective C-section, your insurance will not cover it. On my papers, it says elective C-section and insurance covered it because it's birth. Like if you have some weird insurance and you have to whatever, you talk to your doctor and they know exactly how to put it in to have it covered, because that's what the doctors do. They do paperwork, they do the whatever, and they get it worked out. So everything's situated and everybody's, but that is a big thing, is that I have heard that overseas, other countries, oh man, you don't want to be in Canada trying to get an elective C-section. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be in the UK trying to get an elective C-section, because they want you to have a natural birth because they want to keep their numbers low of C-sections. They don't. And there is a huge, huge thing, is that whole numbers low thing, which I'm sure we see it all the time. Marissa knows what I'm talking about. We see it in the groups all the time where, oh my God, it's over 20% or it's closer to 30 or whatever. And what has came out from the UK? Oh no, they're going to change that real quick, because the injury and death rates have been so terribly bad. And that when they look back at the records, a C-section would have prevented all of that. So things are changing.
Two hospitals. So there was the first one, didn't cause any waves. The second one that just came out recently has only one hospital really that they're looking at recently. So you know if it's happening in that hospital, that it's been happening for a very long time, it's widespread, and that they always quote the World Health Organization, oh, it should be 15%. No, that isn't true. If you look at places where the C-section rate is 15% or below, the death and injury rates are horrendous. So it's not realistic to think you're either going to have a very low number and there are people being harmed, or you're going to have more surgeries that in retrospect were unnecessary, but everyone's okay. So it's always a cost-cutting measure.
And I had no idea that, so when they told me that I had to have a vaginal birth because it was contraindicated, I thought that once I got to the hospital, the only way that I'd be able to have a section was if it became emergent. And I think that's probably something else that a lot of people don't know, is that, you know, like, it doesn't have to be an emergency for it to be, you know, doesn't have to be, you don't have to get to the point where it's an emergency to get the C-section. You don't have to go through everything that you go through. So, but yeah, I mean, I had no idea. So yeah, these are things that people aren't talking about in, you know, your birthing classes. But yeah, I figured, okay, well, you know, if labor stalls, or, you know, I've been in labor for too long because my water broke, and I know there's like the time limit that, you know, you have before they have to get baby out. I just figured, you know, we'll just have to get to that point where it's an emergency for them to actually do the C-section. The information might be out there, but it's not really out there. You know, you'll see these articles that have to do with like incontinence issues, but they're like, but this is such a low percentage, so don't even bother reading about it. This isn't something that you need to think about because it's not going to happen to you. Well,
they also tell you it won't happen until you get older.
Right.
Oh, it's not going to happen until you're past menopause. And that's not true.
Right. Or if you have a whole bunch of kids.
Yeah, you have to have like 6 kids is what they're telling you, or like 10 kids for it to be an issue. And that's also not true. That's not very respectful of people's autonomy. You should be able to choose your risks, being very informed.